What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Redonkulous Gaming. We have some major news today. The first day of October is bringing some sad news to those of you who have just been chomping at the bit to get your hands on Shadowlands, and maybe some good news for those of you who have been playing around with beta, or you have friends who have kind of been giving you a sneak peek at the game and you've been a little worried about maybe the state of the covenants and the overall balance of the game. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of jump into the announcement. Let me just go ahead and pull up here. Blizzard actually just came out today, and this is coming specifically from John Haidt, who is the executive producer of World of Warcraft. This is done in an official blue post. It says, "To the WoW community, I wanted to let you know that we're delaying the release of Shadowlands to later this year. First issue with that, why not just tell us when you're going to be delaying it to? Obviously, they don't want to disappoint and let us down and throw out yet another date and have to move it again. But as you'll see later on, they give us a date for pre-patch, and as of right now, pre-patch maybe only has 2 weeks worth of content, and that's kind of stretching it. So, I mean, overall, this is kind of a bummer that they can't at least tell us how long we're going to be stuck with pre-patch. Just because if you're in it for the questing and maybe you're not a fan of the zombie apocalypse type environment that we're going to be living in for the duration of pre-patch, this is not necessarily good news to not have an end date to figure out when we get to stop turning into zombies. So that's just kind of my first thought, jumping off and hearing that there is no new release date accompanying this announcement. It says next, and while we're still in the process of determining the right new date to launch, we felt it was important to let you know about this change in plans as soon as we could. This was an incredibly difficult decision for the team, as we're eager to get the expansion into your hands as you are to play it. So they're as eager to give it to us as we are to play it. Yeah, okay. It's Blizzard, whatever. I am glad ultimately that they decided to take a closer look at everything, and they really are listening to the community this time. It doesn't matter how hard you meme or what what thumbnail you click on that said Blizz finally listened. I mean, overall, they do actually seem to be interacting a little bit better this time around with the community, and even if the interaction isn't there, they're at least listening to some of the complaints. They go on to say, but ultimately we feel it's the right decision for the game and for our players. I currently agree. Let me just bring up one example of why I agree. Did a video not too long ago about all 6 tanks and kind of their current stack rankings for covenants. This shouldn't even be a thing. To give us the balance that Blizzard has been talking about, it shouldn't matter which of these 6 tanks that you choose. Granted, tanks are always gonna, for example, there's going to be, there's always going to be a tier list of tanks themselves. But when it comes to like Druid, for example, the Druid Bear Claw there should be the exact same tier all the way across the board. Same with Demon Hunter, same with DK, Warrior, Monk, so on and so forth. You guys get it. But ultimately, tier lists like this shouldn't exist based on the strength of Covenant abilities. And then if you take it a step further, this gets even more convoluted when you start to factor in conduits. So this is why Blizzard is doing this, is because this should not happen. The fact that you're introducing a covenant system that we're tying ourselves to for the duration of the expansion means that we should not be dealing with a tier list that looks like this, that is so scattered, where you've got, down to the left in the C tier, we've got our Kyrian Warrior, and then, all the way on top, we've got our Venthyr DK, whereas Warrior that maybe joins a Necrolord is going to be closer to the A and B tier. So, or the one in Venthyr is between A and B tier. Just to give you guys an example, they're trying to normalize this as much as possible so that this does not become a thing and something that they have to consistently deal with and patch. I don't know that whatever extra time they're buying themselves here is going to give them the ability to accomplish this, but that's my initial feedback, is that this, and the fact that I even did a video on it, should not even be happening if beta was as balanced as they would like us all to believe. So let's go on here and bring up the next piece of this. So it says, over the past several months of testing, we've made significant progress iterating on and polishing the core features of gameplay of Shadowlands. We're at a point where the zones, the campaign, the level up questing experience, and the story we have to tell are essentially ready to share. So that's the good news, is that they've got core features, core gameplay, the zones, the campaign, the level up experience, all that stuff. Like, the core functionality of the game is all there, and I absolutely agree with that statement. They have literally everything in place except for the balancing. That's pretty much where I'm at. They then go on to say that we're excited by the covenants at the heart of the expansion, and it's been a thrill to see Torghast take shape into a fun new kind of WoW experience, thanks in no small part to your input. So they're excited about covenants, but at the same time, that's their biggest problem. So they're going to have to do a little bit of soul searching here. Torghast is going to be crazy fun. There's no doubt about it. If any of you have played Final Fantasy XIV, Endless Dungeon style, it's going to be similar to that, within the confines of WoW, of course, but it's just a different way to experience the game, and that part is super fun. So Torghast so far is awesome. However, I have heard some complaints within the community, and I've seen numerous tweets that just kind of say, hey, it feels really bad to have my weekly experience tied to the fact that I have to do Torghast at least once a week. There are some people who don't like that, and they're never going to be able to craft legendaries if they don't at least do Torghast once a week. So something to be very mindful of. Okay, next they go on to say, however, as everything started to come together, we've been listening to and building upon your feedback. They've definitely, if they've been listening, they haven't been telling us that they've been listening because they have not been overly active on their own forums. So that's definitely one thing where it's just kind of like, okay, great, you've been listening, but at least give us some feedback on the feedback that we're giving you so that you know, and we know how much this is actually impacting your decision. So anyway, it's become clear that we need a little more time for additional polish. Couldn't agree more. And to balance and iterate on some interlocking pieces. Those interlocking pieces, translation, covenant abilities, and conduit systems. One of them are either going to have to go entirely, or they're just going to, they're going to be in balancing hell for the duration of this expansion if it goes live the way that it's looking today. So, obviously it's not. That's why they're doing this. But, good catch on their part to not force something to market before it's ready. Particularly those related to the end game, aka again covenants and conduits. Conduits are not something that you unlock really until the end game unless you're on an alt anyway. Covenant abilities, same thing, you choose that on your first character as soon as you hit level 60 cap. Shadowlands is one of the most intricate expansions we've yet created, and while we've made great progress, the challenge of tuning the endgame was compounded by the team having to work from home. Of course, so many games have been delayed this year as a result of COVID. Let's call it what it is. I was shocked that Blizzard announced something prior to November anyway. I was happy, and then that happiness slowly turned into panic the more I got my hands on beta and played some of the end games. So specifically dungeons, and then obviously the Covenant abilities that I've been featuring on the channel just for the 6 tanks. They're definitely not balanced, and that's been very obvious by my feedback and many others. And just again, we'll pull this up again, this should not exist. There should not be a tier list for which Covenant you pick. It should essentially be, I'm going to play a Druid tank, and I should be able to play any of the 4 Covenants. That's what they're striving for. We'll see if they end up getting there. This is, I guess, a step in the right direction to give them some more time on that. Blizzard has committed to quality. We believe Shadowlands will be something special, and we've heard from many of you who feel the same. We need this extra time to ensure Shadowlands lives up to its full potential. That is a bold statement. I'm glad they said it, and again, as someone who has been playing the beta for a couple months now, I would say that yes, that is very true, and I'm glad that they're recognizing it. So hopefully they make use of this extra time. Now, just to kind of end, and this is where I get a little bit, weary about what's being said, because in the meantime, we're excited to announce that beginning October 13th, we will be releasing the Shadowlands pre-patch. Why? If you don't have a release date, why are you releasing the pre-patch? Granted, the corruption system has been stale for a long time. There's not much to do, really. A lot of guilds have already stopped raiding, mine included. So why are you releasing the pre-patch on October 13th if we don't have a new launch date in mind? You can make a couple of arguments, which is what they try to do here. This lays a lot of the groundwork for the expansion and includes our revamped character leveling. So that new player experience, the revamped character leveling, Exile's Reach, all that's going to be in there, right? And a host of new character customization options. So you get to go to the barbershop. The character design and selection screen is super cool. I won't argue with that. Once we get closer to Shadowlands release, you'll be called upon to defend Azeroth against a resurgence of the Scourge during our pre-launch event. So that's what I'm having a tough time separating. Pre-patch is supposed to bring the Scourge event, right? The zombie outbreak. If they are saying that pre-patch is going live on October 13th, does that also mean that they are going to hold on the Scourge event until we actually have a Shadowlands release date? I'm hoping that's what they're saying here. The problem is that if you go on PTR, you'll see that the Scourge event was up since week 2 of the PTR, and that was very much the plan. Is you go ahead and you release the patch. A week later, Scourge event starts, and then there's roughly maybe 2 weeks of questing, and that's being super generous. It's actually just a number of hours questing. They just have gated it by 2 weeks as it stands today. So we'll see what they end up doing, but I don't think anyone's going to be super happy with a 4-week Scourge event. So hopefully they take that into account here, and it kind of sounds like they're alluding to it, but again, we'll have to see. Thanks for your support and passion and for your continued help and feedback as we head towards the finish line. We'll see you in Shadowlands soon. And that's John Haidt, again, executive producer of World of Warcraft. So a couple of things are jumping off in my mind. The first of which is, there's only a number of things that would ultimately really piss people off about this expansion. The first of which is, obviously, you've been hearing a lot of people scream from the rooftops, please don't go forcing these systems that we did not ask for down our throats. Please make sure that this is ready before we go to market with this thing. Please, please, please take the extra time or whatever is needed. So for the majority of people who have already played the game and seen some endgame, whether that's dungeons or raiding, they would probably agree with Blizzard's decision today. For the rest of you who don't necessarily have a good understanding of why this is, or you're at the point where you're like, I don't care, just balance it as I play, let me just kind of be the first to tell you that that's probably not a very good idea overall. The reason for that is because the way that they've set this game up, the way that they've set this system up, makes it so that you are tied to your covenant. Yes, it's very easy to switch covenants, but the goal is to have you identify in the same way that you identify with your character, using Blizzard's terminology, the same way you choose a character, they want you to choose your covenant. They want it to be an identity thing, not a player power thing. So as long as they're sticking with these borrowed power systems, which they clearly are through the covenant system, they need to be able to balance these abilities instead of having such this crazy spread out matrix here that you see. This is not the way that it was intended to be. However, it very much is the way that it is right now. And unless they make some major overhauls and they start to listen and proactively engage the community, so beyond just reading their own forums and not necessarily letting us know, yeah, hey, we hear you, they need to engage and further delve on the issues that are being raised by the community. I'm messing around in the Demon Hunter right now, so I will just use the Demon Hunter as a very, very quick example of what I'm talking about. If we look at the Demon Hunter, and let me just jump into Vengeance. As a Demon Hunter, I'm getting a couple things that are baseline that are coming back, and that's great. But as you can see, right now I've got the Demon Hunter and Kyrian and Venthyr being the two strongest. If I were to go to Night Fae, overall, it was more of a PvP ability. They've revamped it, and they've done some changes recently to bring its damage to be more on par with Venthyr and Kyrian. So this is likely going to take a step up if I were to revisit this today. It would come up maybe closer and straddle the line between A and B tier. given the fact that it just wasn't functioning properly on beta when I was testing it. However, you still have Necrolords down all the way to the bottom right. And the reason for that is that it's actually something that is pretty cool. If I were to hit my Covenant ability here, I'd be able to summon a demon, which then I would kill, and then wherever it died, I would land in like it would be like a pool of blood. So hey, this sigil, this is my pool of blood. That sigil is, or that pool of blood is up for a while, and as long as I stand in it, I get a buff, a 10% haste buff and a 10% mitigation buff. However, the thing I want to hit is all the way over here, or my co-tank in a raid is tanking it all the way over here, and I made the mistake of screwing up or dropping my demon blood here when it needed to be over here. Or maybe we're performing a tank swap and it's a dragon, and I have to come all the way over to the side, right? And suddenly I'm out of range, or I'm not necessarily able to hit my pool of blood. So that's ultimately the problem with abilities like that. If they were to fix that and make it so that you step into the pool of blood and you carry that buff with you for 10 seconds, and if you dip your toe back into the water or into the blood, you get that buff for another 10 seconds. That's just a prime example of why this is so broken. But you would probably see the Necrolord DH ability come all the way up from C tier into probably straddling the A and B tier. And now we're talking about better class balance. The most recent changes that they've made to Death Knight, specifically the Night Valkyrian, as well as the Necrolord Covenant abilities, Death Knight for blood is probably in the best state of any of the 6 tanks right now, just because the changes that they made to Kyrian made it less of just a single target Covenant ability and more of a raid-wide target ability. What they did for Night Fae is they tied it to rotation because it was just, quite frankly, way too strong. The change they made to Necrolord is that now it'll passively stack your bone armor, but it's not going to work as well in single target fights. So there are just certain things that they're doing, and I'm just using tanks as an example just because that's what I've got stack ranked here. But there's certainly some things that Blizzard needs to do to fix this, and they shouldn't necessarily be too upset about this little letter right here, because it's the right decision that they've made for the community. It really is. It's just that there's going to be a lot of really frustrated gamers who have been waiting to get their hands on Shadowlands. Some people I know have already taken off of work, and they're just now kind of stuck saying, you should have told us, right? And everyone's been speculating, when's the pre-patch, when's the pre-patch? They have not come out with a pre-patch announcement until now because of this, and because of the fact that they were dealing with so many issues. They just stress test the pre-patch, or the PTR, yesterday, just to make sure everything is still going to function after the stat squish and everything like that. So we probably should have expected this, in all honesty. The reasons that they laid out, let's just read between the lines and say, hey guys, we're having a really tough time balancing our conduits and our covenant system to make it work the way that we want it to work. Therefore, we need to release the game. That's what this says. That's the short version. TLDR, our conduits and our covenants are broken. We need a little bit more time to revise this. For those of you who have watched the other, many references to Pull the Ripcord, the interview that Preach did with Ian, that is likely going to be their best option as things stand today, but they have been making an effort to further balance these abilities. So little bit of a ramble here, so I'm going to cut it off now, but this is the kind of the immediate reaction to this, just giving you guys some insight. If you don't have beta, this is what's going on, and this is why it's probably best for the community. I will say that as someone who is a big fan of WoW and is very excited for Shadowlands, because it's going to be a much better game than, quite frankly, the product that we're playing today in live. We're just not at that point where we should be consuming Shadowlands. It's just, everyone's going to be relatively unhappy, and if they need a full month to put polish on it and then another month after they launch it to start to balance the end game a little bit, so be it. I mean, this change really effectively gives them 2 months of extra runway, one in which Shadowlands is live and one in which it isn't. But hopefully we're not looking at an extended Scourge invasion. But I have a feeling people are going to get pretty darn bored just not being able to do much in pre-patch other than sit there and wait for Shadowlands to come out. But hey, love to know your thoughts below, and let me know if you want me to do more videos like this one.